Hello and welcome to the Space News Commercial Space Transformers series, where we aim to give you a behind-the-scenes look at the people and companies driving the space industry's commercial transformation. I'm Jason Rainbow, Senior Staff Writer at Space News, and today I'll be talking to Martijn Blanken, CEO of Saudi Arabia's Neo Space Group, or NSG. NSG was created last year by the Public Investment Fund, one of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds, as part of plans to transform Saudi Arabia into a major force in space and to further diversify its economy from oil. The group has already made domestic and international acquisitions as it seeks to not only build capabilities in the sector, but also to develop local talent. Martin, thank you very much for your time today. NSG recently acquired a German geospatial solutions platform called UP42 from Airbus in its first international acquisition since its inception in May. You also took over Earth imagery and analytics provider Taqniyah Space from Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, or PIF. So the Earth observation market is clearly a major focus for you. How do you ultimately see NSG's future businesses split between geospatial services, communications, navigation, and Internet of Things monitoring networks?
Thank you, Jason, and thank you for having me on this session. Look, it's difficult to answer the question actually, because to some extent it will depend on how the market will develop and also on how we best can execute our strategy. Part of our strategy will be dependent on the execution of our strategy will be dependent on acquisitions. Some of it will be dependent on partnership, and some of it we will build and develop organically. It will be a combination of all three ways to execute our strategy. But in particular, when you look at the acquisitions, it's not always within your control, and the same would be true for partnerships. But if you look at the market size, and obviously the satellite communications market is substantially bigger than the geospatial market. However, if you look at growth, there's a lot more growth expected percentage-wise in the geospatial market. So I guess all these markets are important to us. It will be difficult for me to predict exactly which one is going to be bigger, and even more difficult to say which one is more important. All of them are important to us.
I see. And in communications, I know NSG plans to start out by leasing multi-orbit satellite capacity, but aims to own its own constellations eventually. What's the strategy behind this phased approach, and what are the signs that will tell you it's time to shift from leasing to ownership?
Yeah, in the satellite communications market, and in any market for that matter, I'm a big believer that one has to develop a relationship with customers and build up a good understanding what they need. And once you have a good feel for that, you can pick and choose whatever technologies and components are required to deliver a compelling solution. Satellite communication is just a component of a compelling communication solution, which also includes user terminals. It often includes a software platform that provides traffic management, sometimes AI capabilities to automate the traffic flows. It includes professional services, managed services, cybersecurity, and all these subcomponents are packaged together in a sort of seamless solution to end customers. And therefore, we don't want to be positioned as a reseller of somebody else's capabilities. We are a provider of solutions, of which satellite communications is an important component, but certainly not the only component. Our midstream business, sorry, go ahead, Jason.
No, I'm sorry. That's going to be one to the next
Our
question.
midstream business will be focused on managing and operating satellite assets ourselves. And the first satellite will be a geostationary satellite called SGS-1, which is already in orbit, which we will operationalize. And we use that asset in the open orbit ecosystem. So some of our airline, the in-flight communication customers will be using that satellite to some extent if they fly over certain areas. And then it will hand off to other satellites within the open orbit remit to provide a global coverage.
I see. Okay. Yeah, and I was going to say, in the background of all of this, PIF and similar sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East are driving just major investments in space. What role do you see sovereign wealth funds playing in helping shape the global commercial space industry?
Look, the most obvious role that they will play is the provider of capital.
Hmm.
And they're not doing it because they are generous. They are doing it because they are diversifying or make a contribution to the diversification of the economy. In the case of PIF, it's Saudi Arabia. And space is a growing economy. It's an important economy. It underpins many other industries. I don't think that anyone can imagine a retail industry without space assets to provide navigation services, for example, or the automotive industry, again with navigation, or the oil and gas industry without satellite communication, or the forestry and agriculture without Earth observation industry. So all these industries underpin other economies. And the role of these sovereign wealth funds is primarily to provide capital, but secondarily, they also create a bit of a hub, an ecosystem, which accelerates the innovation in that sector. So it creates a new economy in its own right.
Okay, and with increasing activity from countries like the UAE and Qatar in space, what then sets Saudi Arabia apart in its approach to space investment and development?
Um, well, as you probably are well aware, in space and space-related activities, often there is an element of sovereignty involved. There are certain customers within countries that prefer to be served by uh, suppliers who are also owned and operated from that same country, partially for sovereignty reasons, security reasons. So that is one example of how these players differentiate. You would see, it would be unlikely to see Saudi Arabian service providers, satellite service providers, provide highly secure and confidential services to the Norwegian government, for example, or the other way around for that matter. So
Mm.
sovereignty is one aspect. The other aspect is more the markets that you choose to serve. Not everyone in the Middle East is going after the same markets. To some extent, they will, but to some extent, they choose their own markets. And thirdly, the level of international orientation will be a big difference as well. Saudi Arabia and the PIF have demonstrated that they are quite comfortable making investments outside of the region. The acquisition of Up 42 that you referred to in the beginning is an example of that. And there's a good chance that more international acquisitions will follow. That is not necessarily the case for all other sovereign wealth funds. That doesn't mean that one is good and the other one is bad. It's just a different strategy. They focus on different markets with different types of assets, and then the sovereignty component. So these are sort of, I think, the three main differentiators that you were asking on.
Yeah, are you able to elaborate a little bit more? You touched on this a little bit, but just what specific capabilities or regions perhaps you are targeting for these acquisitions to, these domestic and international acquisitions to strengthen your market capabilities? What infrastructure like spaceports, satellite manufacturing facilities, or ground stations is NSG prioritizing to ensure the Middle East becomes this global space hub?
Yeah, good question. So I think it is in a number of different domains. But if you look at satellite communication, good example, if you operate a geostationary satellite, by definition, it covers quite a substantial part of the Earth, of the world, and you cannot serve that entire geography with just one teleport. You need to have multiple gateways. So yes, we have already invested in gateways in the Canary Islands, one in Portugal, and there is a chance that we will invest in one or two additional gateways to serve the sort of European, North American, Middle Eastern region better. That's not because we are keen to make these investments. It's a simple necessity in order to serve these regions properly. I think it is also important to know that if you do decide to invest in satellites and satellite technology, by definition, it is a sort of a regional, if not a global play. Satellites don't restrict themselves to national boundaries. They, by definition, go across. So in order you want to get a good return on your investment, you have to consider providing these services to customers outside of the geographical boundaries of the country. And you can choose to do that yourself, or you can choose to do that through partners, and then you wholesale the capacity to partners. Well, the way we will go about this is probably a combination of both. In some instances, we choose to serve certain customers in the satellite communication space, broadband or narrowband, or in the geospatial space. We serve them ourselves, and sometimes we serve them through an ecosystem of partners. There's no right or wrong, but it is important to highlight that these business models are distinctly different, and we operate them as distinctly different business models. We will never force Tacnia ETS, for example, which now has been rebranded to NSG Geospatial Services. We will never force them to use assets that we may own in the future. They should choose whatever satellite imagery is best to serve their clients and to provide the answers and insights to the clients that they are being tasked to do.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, and then sticking to that global picture, many established satellite operators are burdened with debts or declining revenues because of legacy broadcast services and so on. How does NSG's clean slate, as it were, allow it to compete differently against more established players out there?
That's an excellent question, Jason. I think um, it is, on balance, a big advantage. Clearly, there are some downsides to it as well, because more established players, they have a recurring revenue stream and a cash flow coming from existing customers. They have an existing relationship with customer bases that we don't have. That's clearly a downside. It's easier to work with existing clients and expand the services you provide to them than to win the client to begin with. However, the distinctive upsides or benefits that we see is that one, none of our leadership team is quote unquote distracted by managing a declining revenue and cash flow. None of us distracted by a constraint of cash because our debt burden is too high. We have been set up as a growth play, and I have worked in environments where, for whatever reason, the focus had to be on cost reduction and on simplification and consolidation. It creates a very different mindset than if you have a growth and expansion mindset where there is room to try things that haven't been done before. We are very well aware that if we go to market and say, we offer you exactly the same what the other guys offer, but please buy from us, it's not a very compelling story. So we are forced to be creative and to be different in order to set us apart from the rest of the market. And for instance, that's what we're trying to do in the aviation market at the moment with our offerings. But that's also what we will do in the geospatial market and potentially other markets in the future.
Exciting stuff. Thank you. I know we're almost out of time, so just one more for me, if I can. Um, Building a space industry requires significant human capital, of course. How is NSG investing in workforce development and inspiring the next generation of Saudi engineers and scientists? Unrelated really. I'm just looking for like kind of your take on how do you balance just acquiring cutting edge technology with building internal capabilities for a more sustainable business?
Yeah, again, an excellent question. And I wish the answer was very simple. Unfortunately, it's not. As I've mentioned before, our strategy execution is a combination of the partnerships where you learn from parties who've done it before, acquisitions where you buy resources and capabilities that you try to export to other parts in the organization. And to some extent, it will be done organically, where you recruit people and to join the organization. And the recruitment will be a healthy balance between recruiting experienced industry executives from usually overseas, from outside of the kingdom, like myself, for example, or like Rove, with the resources that are available here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. There's one benefit: the quality of the education system here is quite high, and on top of that, many people have been educated at least partially overseas as well. So there is quite a big talent pool that one can use. There are 26 to 27 million Saudi Arabians, many of them under the age of 30. That is a very large talent pool that one can draw from. And in order to get access to the talent pools, that you start to with partnership with universities. And we have announced one of those partnerships already. So you identify research projects that you work on together, partially for the benefit to get insights that you had not had before, but it is also in a way a recruitment tool to convince some of the people from these top universities in the country to join the NEO Space Group.
Wonderful, thank you. And for the viewers there, Ralph is your marketing and communications expert that helps set up this interview. So
I
thank you
should
very
have
much.
mentioned that. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, I'm looking forward to following your progress in 2025. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Jason. It was a pleasure.